And so in my little town of 300, they were advertising like for a shelf stalker and a truck parts store. And I was like, well, that's kind of pretty much what I'm only ever going to, be able to do in life. Even though when I was in college, I worked 7 days a week. I had 3 different jobs. I was nannying, I was running an office, I was lifeguarding, I was paying for my college, paying for my car. Like I was always a grind. But I get back home after dropping out and failing what I felt like was a failure. But I guess failure only comes when you actually quit. And
Totally.
I kind of had a 24-hour pity party, and pulled up my big girl pants and went back to work. And the rest is really history. But, it's funny because when I look back at all that, at the time I thought, oh, I did it. So if we were going to go on a super fast Cliff Notes version, I was stocking shelves in a Fortune 200 oil and gas company, which was a subsidiary in a truck parts store. So the truck parts store didn't work out. They put me at front desk as a secretary after a year. And I go to my manager and I was like, hey, I feel like, I bought my first house. I felt like I was doing pretty good. You had stable ground, but I want to grow. And it was all men. I was the only woman in the office. And he says to me, well, kind of like, hey, sweetie, you're going to have to go and take an office job somewhere else. Well, luckily the organization was huge, multiple states, different locations. And so, I didn't even take it like it was disrespectful. He never saw me as I could be a supervisor. I could work in the field. So I found an HR job. From that HR job, then I became a supervisor in the call center. From the supervisor in the call center, I became a salesperson, oil and gas. So I was trading on the NYMEX, selling to big companies, and I was getting all this experience. And then they had an open position for a director in that call center that I left as a supervisor, which was union. And I got hired. I jumped my manager, which my manager was a scoundrel, kind of a liar and just all kinds of stuff. Well, I jumped my manager, come back in and become the director over 80,000 customers in this unionized environment where grievances were getting thrown left and right. But because I came kind of from the front lines and had friends, and we did some amazing things. And then less than 11 months, I got my first opportunity to become a vice president running the gas company on the whole west side of Texas in 47 cities and all of customer service for Texas. And then from there, we went from a geographical based model to a function model. So I took all of customer service for the largest distribution company in the US, Oklahoma, Kansas, and Texas, and was running all of that. And then I fell in love. I divorced once, fell in love again. And my life was a train wreck because all I knew was work. Yeah. I focused on work. It was career over everything. It was money, power, career, success. And I thought through my effort, my grind, my hustle, that it was really all me. But if I look back on it, I can totally see God's hand opening every door. So I ended up getting my undergrad in psychology, master's in marketing. They send me to Harvard Business School. This tells you how crazy the story is they sent me, they put me up for Harvard Business School for emerging leaders. Well, Harvard calls and they're like, well, this girl, look at her resume. I mean, I was probably at the time 34-ish. Yeah. Look at her resume. We want to put her in the senior executive leadership, focus on diversity, globalization, innovation, and leadership diversity. And by the way, you'll have to be here in a week. At the time I was getting my master's, me and my daughter just moved into Oklahoma. I called my mom. I said, Mom, who was hours away, I said, Mom, I need you to come help me get moved, take care of Giovanna so I can go to Harvard because this is an opportunity of a lifetime.
Yeah,
and it really was. It was a ride. My point is it was all a dream because it really was amazing. Yeah, it was crazy.
Holy moly. So once you got the actual thing, because obviously I know you not at all in that context. Mm-hmm. And so what was the aha? How old was your daughter when you made the revelation or had the revelation to make a massive shift out of something that had become essentially your life's work at that point, right? What everyone knew you as. How do you get out of that?
Yeah. It was identity. I mean, my whole identity was wrapped up in who I was in that company. And I even remember, financially, I mean, I was set. My boss, who was the president at the time, I wanted to go back to college and get my master's. And he was like, Parker, why would you do that? You're 34 years old. You're set for life. And he was right.
Yeah.
Like if I would have stayed that course, I mean, the salaries and the publicly traded is all out there public, so you could see it, but it was multiple 6, just under the 7. So that was my path.
Yeah.
And, it was so funny because even though I was a Sunday Christian, I knew about God, but it was a real struggle. Like, this is corporate, publicly traded oil and gas, a lot of men, a lot of engineer thinking. I mean, they sent their top execs to Harvard, so that kind of tell you anything what's going on.
Yeah, very, very much.
And so then there's this Christian side. I was raised in church. I knew about God. And so I was kind of like this pull, but God took me, I'll never forget it. I haven't really spoke about this publicly, but we went to church. Wow, there it is. Right there. Went to church, heard the message about the axe head. And it was Pastor Craig Rochelle with Life Church. And he was talking about the axe head, and it was forget about what you want, focus on what you have, let God provide you with what you need. That was kind of the basis of that message. Yep. So the next week we go to New Mexico to visit my, at the time, husband's family. From Oklahoma to New Mexico, completely different church, everything. Yeah. We go to church. The pastor's up there. Things got kind of weird, just saying. And it's like a longer period of worship in just this moment. Then he comes up and he starts preaching. He preaches about the axe head. Oh. And the story is basically that, they're cutting down trees. The axe head falls into the water. He says, "My Lord, it was borrowed." It was Elisha, right? Elisha? Yeah. Brings it back up to the top of the water. And the point was, let God provide it for you. Like, what's lost is not lost. It's just going to be gone. It's all borrowed because it's all his in the first place, and it's not yours. And so to hear that message back to back, so we were just astounded. So I go up to the pastor and I said to the pastor, "We just heard this message," which is weird. You don't hear about the axe head much. Yeah. And he goes, "This was not at all what I planned." He said, "God wrecked my whole service." He said, "This was truly what God told me I was supposed to preach." So I was like, something's going on. Something's going to be lost and it's going to come back. And I don't know what it is. I don't know what it means, but I look back in my journals, I see it. And I was also very much in love with my almost new husband. I don't think we quite married yet. And so it was like, we wanted to be together. There was all these restraints and zip code stuff and whatever else. And the door shut. And I left that corporate career, and I'll never forget looking down at my daughter and saying, I'm no longer going to be with One Oak. And she looked at me, big tear eyes. Think about this. This little girl sacrificed her life. Yeah. By the time she was in 2nd, 3rd grade, we had probably moved 12 times. She's had 12 houses in her life. Just bought and sold. That was the lifestyle we were going on. Yeah. And she looks at me with these big, beautiful brown eyes, welled up with tears. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget, because you would just, one of those memories. And she said, "If you're not Krystal Parker vice president, who will you be?" And at the time you would go, "Oh, poor daughter," and think, "Well, what a terrible mother you are." And it's true, because it was my career and my career and my career and my career. It was my badge I wore. And, God was making those promises back then that it's going to go away, but it's mine. And until you actually see that, you're going to have a long journey to figure it out. Yeah. And I've been on that journey and that ride.